In a small, struggling town where dreams often faded as quickly as they appeared, lived a young boy named Marcus. He was only 12 years old but carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. His mother, Evelyn, worked tirelessly to provide for them, taking on multiple jobs just to keep food on the table and a roof over their heads. Despite her efforts, life wasn't kind to her. It never had been. She fell ill one cold winter, and with no health insurance, the medical bills piled up like an insurmountable mountain. Desperate to help, Marcus decided he would do something extraordinary. Enter the local talent show. The grand prize? $1,000, a sum that could ease some of his mom's burdens. Marcus loved singing. It was the only time he felt truly free, like nothing else mattered except the music flowing through him. He practiced every night after finishing his homework, using YouTube tutorials to teach himself songs. For the talent show, he chose Stand By Me, a song his mother used to hum when he was little. Every note carried hope, not just for the money but also for a miracle. What Marcus didn't know was that this decision would change everything about his life forever. Marcus lived in a tiny apartment on the edge of town. Their building was old, its paint peeling and windows rattling whenever the wind blew too hard. Inside, the furniture was mismatched, picked up from yard sales or donated by neighbors. But despite the worn-out surroundings, Marcus always found beauty in the little things. His favorite spot was the corner of the living room, where sunlight streamed through a crack in the curtains during the afternoon. That's where he sat most evenings, clutching an old guitar his uncle had given him years ago. The strings were frayed and the wood was scratched, but it still made beautiful sounds when Marcus played. Every day after school, Marcus hurried home to check on his mom. Evelyn spent most of her days lying in bed, her face pale and tired. She tried to smile whenever Marcus walked in, but he could see the pain behind her eyes. "How are you feeling today, Mom?" he'd ask, setting down his backpack and sitting beside her. Sometimes she'd nod weakly, saying she was fine, while other times she'd admit she needed more medicine or another doctor's appointment. Each trip to the clinic cost money they didn't have, and Marcus hated seeing his mom suffer because of it. One evening, as Marcus flipped through channels on their ancient TV, he stumbled upon an advertisement for the local talent show. "Win big prizes and showcase your skills," the announcer said cheerfully. At first, Marcus ignored it, thinking it was just another commercial. But then he noticed the details flashing across the screen. First prize was $1,000. $1,000? That amount seemed unimaginable to someone like Marcus, who rarely saw more than $20 at a time. His heart raced as an idea began forming in his mind. If he won that money, he could pay off some of his mom's medical bills. Maybe he could even buy her better medicine or groceries without worrying about running out of food halfway through the month. But there was one problem. Marcus had never performed in front of anyone before. Sure, he sang around the house and sometimes at church, but those were safe spaces where no one judged him. This was different. This was a competition, and people would be watching, criticizing, maybe even laughing. Still, the thought of helping his mom pushed aside his fears. He couldn't let this opportunity slip away. The next morning, Marcus told his mom about the talent show. Evelyn looked surprised but supportive. "You really want to do this, baby?" she asked, her voice soft. Marcus nodded eagerly. "I think I can win, Mom. I'll practice every day until I'm ready." Evelyn smiled, though worry lingered in her expression. She knew how much pressure her son was putting on himself, but she also saw the determination in his eyes. "All right," she said finally. "If this is what you want, I'll support you all the way." With his mom's blessing, Marcus threw himself into preparation. After school, instead of playing outside with friends, he stayed indoors, practicing his song over and over again. He watched videos of famous singers performing Stand By Me, studying their expressions and movements. He wanted to make sure his performance wasn't just good, it had to be unforgettable. Some nights, Evelyn woke up to hear Marcus humming softly in his sleep. Even in his dreams, he was rehearsing. As the days passed, Marcus grew more confident. He imagined himself standing on stage, bathed in bright lights, holding the microphone tightly as his voice filled the room. He pictured the judges nodding approvingly, the audience clapping wildly, and most importantly, he pictured his mom smiling, relieved that she wouldn't have to worry so much anymore. That image kept him going, even when doubt crept in. Finally, the day of the talent show arrived. Marcus dressed carefully in his best clothes, a slightly too big button-up shirt and khaki pants borrowed from a neighbor. Evelyn helped him comb his hair, her hands trembling slightly as she worked. "You look so handsome," she whispered, kissing his forehead. Marcus grinned, trying to hide his nervousness. "Thanks, Mom. Wish me luck." When they arrived at the community center, the place was buzzing with excitement. Families filled the seats, chatting and laughing as participants prepared backstage. Marcus peeked out from behind the curtain, his stomach churning. There were so many people, more than he'd expected. What if he forgot the lyrics? What if his voice cracked? He shook his head, forcing himself to focus. He had practiced enough. He could do this. Backstage, Marcus met the other contestants. Some were older teenagers, others younger kids like him. One girl juggled flaming torches, while another boy performed impressive acrobatics. Marcus felt intimidated but reminded himself why he was here. This wasn't about winning for the sake of fame. It was about saving his mom. As the show began, Marcus sat quietly, listening to each performance. Some were amazing, leaving the crowd cheering loudly. Others weren't as polished, but everyone tried their best. When the host called his name, Marcus took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage. The spotlight blinded him momentarily, but he squinted past it, focusing on the microphone stand in front of him. He gripped the mic tightly, closing his eyes for a second to steady himself. Then he began to sing. His voice started softly, almost hesitant, but as he continued, it grew stronger, filling the room with emotion. He poured his heart into every word, letting the pain, hope, and love he felt for his mom guide him. The audience fell silent, captivated by the raw power of his performance. Even the judges leaned forward, their pens pausing mid-note. By the time Marcus finished, tears glistened in his eyes. He hadn't planned to cry, but the weight of everything, the stress, the fear, the love for his mom, had overwhelmed him. For a moment, the room was completely still. Then applause erupted, louder and more heartfelt than any other act that night. People stood up, clapping and cheering, their faces glowing with admiration. Backstage, Marcus collapsed onto a chair, his legs shaking from adrenaline. He had done it. He had sung his heart out, and the audience had loved it. Now all he could do was wait and hope the judges felt the same way. Little did Marcus know, one of those judges was about to change his life in ways he couldn't possibly imagine. As Marcus stepped off the stage, his heart still racing from the adrenaline of his performance, he couldn't shake the feeling that something extraordinary was about to happen. The applause had been overwhelming, and for the first time in his life, he felt like people truly saw him, not just as a poor boy from the wrong side of town, but as someone with talent and potential. Backstage, the other contestants congratulated him, patting him on the back and telling him how amazing he was, but Marcus barely heard them. His mind was elsewhere, replaying every note, every word, wondering if it had been enough. Meanwhile, seated at the judges' table, a man named David Carter sat quietly, his thoughts swirling. David was a successful music producer who had returned to his hometown after years away. He rarely came back, but something had drawn him to this event, a mix of nostalgia and curiosity. As he watched act after act, he found himself growing restless. Most performances were good, some even impressive, but none of them struck a chord deep within him. That is, until Marcus walked onto the stage. When Marcus began to sing, David felt a jolt of recognition. It wasn't just the boy's voice, though it was undeniably powerful, but something else. There was a familiarity in the way Marcus held himself, in the raw emotion behind his words. It reminded David of someone he once knew, someone he hadn't thought about in years. He leaned forward in his seat, his pen hovering over the notepad in front of him. Who was this kid? And why? Did he feel like he'd seen him before? David's co-judges scribbled notes furiously. Their faces lit up with excitement. One of them turned to David and whispered, "Did you hear that? Incredible." David nodded absently, his eyes fixed on Marcus. He couldn't explain it, but there was something hauntingly familiar about the boy. Maybe it was the shape of his jawline or the intensity in his gaze. Or maybe it was the song itself. "Stand By Me," a tune David vaguely remembered hearing long ago. Whatever it was, it tugged at memories he'd buried deep inside. After Marcus finished singing, the room erupted into applause. David joined in, clapping louder than anyone else. He couldn't help himself. The performance had moved him in ways he didn't expect. When the host announced a short intermission, David excused himself from the judges' table and wandered backstage. He told himself he wanted to congratulate the performers, but deep down, he knew he was looking for one person in particular. Marcus. Backstage was chaotic. Contestants milled about, adjusting costumes, practicing last-minute routines, or simply trying to calm their nerves. David scanned the crowd until his eyes landed on Marcus, sitting alone on a folding chair. The boy looked exhausted, his shoulders slumped and his head bowed. For a moment, David hesitated. What was he doing here? This wasn't like him, chasing after strangers because of some vague sense of déjà vu. But then again, this wasn't just any stranger. Something about Marcus felt important. "Hey," David said softly, approaching the boy. Marcus looked up, startled. "Hi," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. Up close, David could see how young Marcus really was. His face was round and innocent, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and curiosity. "You were incredible out there," David continued, offering a warm smile. "Where did you learn to sing like that?" Marcus shrugged, unsure how to respond. "I don't know," he admitted. "I just do it. My mom used to sing that song when I was little, so I guess it means a lot to me." David nodded, his chest tightening unexpectedly. A mother's song. That explained part of it, but not all. There was still something missing, something David couldn't quite put his finger on. Before he could ask more questions, another contestant called out to Marcus, pulling him into a conversation. David stepped back, watching silently as the boy laughed and joked with his peers. He wanted to stay, to talk more, but he knew he couldn't linger too long without raising suspicion. Reluctantly, he returned to the judges' table, his mind racing. The second half of the talent show passed in a blur for Marcus. He tried to focus on the remaining acts, but his thoughts kept drifting back to the man who had spoken to him. Backstage. Who was he? Why had he seemed so interested in Marcus? The man, David, according to the nameplate on the judge's table, had an air of authority about him, yet there was kindness in his eyes that made Marcus feel safe. Safe enough to wonder if he should trust him. By the time the final act concluded, the tension in the room was palpable. Everyone waited anxiously for the judges to announce the winners. Marcus sat stiffly in his chair, his hands clasped tightly together. He glanced at his mom, who gave him an encouraging smile despite her obvious fatigue. Evelyn had insisted on attending the show, even though she wasn't feeling well. Seeing her there, cheering him on, gave Marcus the strength to keep going. Finally, the host took the stage, holding an envelope. "And now the moment you've all been waiting for, the winner of this year's talent show is..." The pause felt endless. Marcus held his breath, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst. "Marcus Johnson." For a second, Marcus didn't move. Had he heard correctly? Was it really him? Then the audience erupted into cheers and Evelyn jumped to her feet, tears streaming down her face. "Go on, baby," she urged, pushing him gently toward the stage. Shakily, Marcus stood and walked forward, accepting the oversized check from the host. $1,000. It was real. He had done it. As the crowd applauded, Marcus scanned the room, searching for David. Their eyes met briefly, and David gave him a small nod, his expression unreadable. Marcus didn't understand what it meant, but it left him with a strange sense of hope. Later that evening, after the excitement died down and the audience dispersed, Marcus and Evelyn lingered near the exit. They were packing up their things when a reporter approached them. She introduced herself as Sarah, a journalist covering the event for the local newspaper. "Congratulations on your win, Marcus," she said warmly. "Do you mind if I ask a few questions?" Marcus hesitated, glancing at his mom for guidance. Evelyn nodded, giving him permission to speak. "Sure," Marcus said shyly. Sarah smiled and pulled out her notebook. "So, tell me," she began, "what inspired you to enter the talent show? And what does this win mean to you?" Marcus took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. "Well," he started slowly, "my mom has been sick for a while, and we've been struggling with medical bills. I thought if I won the money it could help her get better. Singing makes me happy, and I hoped it would make others happy too." Sarah's pen paused mid-sentence. Her expression softened, and she glanced at Evelyn, who looked away, wiping tears from her eyes. "That's incredibly brave of you, Marcus," Sarah said gently. "Your mom must be very proud." "She is," Marcus replied, smiling faintly, "and I'm proud of her too. She works so hard even when she doesn't feel good. I just wanted to do something to help." Nearby, David overheard the conversation. He stood frozen, his heart aching at Marcus's words. The boy's selflessness, his determination, it all resonated deeply with David. And then there was Evelyn. David recognized her immediately, though she looked older, wearier than he remembered. Memories flooded back, memories he'd tried so hard to forget. Years ago, David had grown up in the same town, living in a neighborhood not unlike the one Marcus called home. He'd been reckless and selfish, chasing his dreams without considering the consequences. When Evelyn got pregnant, he panicked, leaving town without looking back. He never knew what happened to her, or to the child they created together. Until now. Watching Marcus interact with his mom, David realized the truth. This boy, this talented, resilient boy, was his son. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut, leaving him breathless. How could he have missed it? The resemblance was undeniable, especially now that he allowed himself to see it. But seeing it also meant facing the guilt he'd carried for years. Guilt for abandoning Evelyn. Guilt for not being there for Marcus. David debated whether to approach them right then and there. Should he introduce himself? Claim the family he'd lost? But what if they rejected him? What if he wasn't welcome? These questions swirled in his mind as he watched Marcus hug his mom, the oversized check clutched tightly in his hand. For now, David decided to wait. He needed time to process everything, to figure out what to say and how to say it. As Marcus and Evelyn left the community center, arm in arm, David stayed behind, watching them disappear into the night. He felt a mix of emotions, regret, longing, and a flicker of hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to make things right. The morning after the talent show, David woke up with a heavy heart. He had barely slept, his mind consumed by thoughts of Marcus and Evelyn. The revelation that Marcus was his son weighed heavily on him, bringing back memories he'd spent years trying to bury. He couldn't stop thinking about Evelyn's face, how tired she looked, how strong she seemed despite her struggles. And then there was Marcus, a boy who carried the weight of the world on his shoulders yet still managed to shine like a star. David knew he couldn't ignore this any longer. For years, he had told himself that leaving town was the right thing to do, that chasing his dreams meant sacrificing everything else. But now, seeing the life he might have been a part of, he realized how wrong he had been. He needed answers. He needed to talk to Evelyn. Later that day, David found himself standing outside Evelyn's apartment building. It was an old, weathered structure, its paint peeling and windows cracked. The sight of it made his chest tighten. This was where his son had grown up, where Evelyn had raised Marcus alone without help from the father who should have been there. Guilt gnawed at him as he climbed the creaky stairs to her door. He knocked softly, unsure of what to expect. After a few moments, the door opened and Evelyn appeared. She looked surprised to see him, her eyes widening in recognition. "David?" she said hesitantly, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Hi, Evelyn," David replied, forcing a smile. "Can we talk?" Evelyn hesitated, glancing over her shoulder as if checking whether someone was listening. Finally, she stepped aside, letting him in. The apartment was small but tidy, filled with simple furniture and personal touches that hinted at the love shared between mother and son. David noticed a framed photo on the wall. It was of Marcus as a toddler, grinning widely as he held a toy guitar. The image struck David hard, reminding him of all the moments he'd missed. They sat down at the kitchen table, the silence between them thick with unspoken words. David cleared his throat, searching for the right way to begin. I came here because of Marcus," he finally said. "I think you know why." Evelyn sighed deeply, her hands clasped tightly together. "Yes, I know," she admitted quietly. Her voice was calm, but there was a sadness in her eyes that David couldn't ignore. "He's your son." David nodded, though the confirmation didn't bring him relief. If anything, it made the weight on his shoulders feel even heavier. "Why, didn't you tell me?" he asked, his tone soft but firm. "All these years I had no idea." Evelyn looked away, her jaw tightening slightly. "What would you have done, David? Stayed here? Given up your dreams for us?" Her words were sharp but not angry, more resigned, as if she already knew the answer. "You left without saying goodbye. You didn't even ask if I was okay. I didn't want to burden you with something you clearly weren't ready for." Her honesty stung, cutting through David's defenses like a knife. She was right. He hadn't been ready. At 18, he had been selfish and scared, running away from responsibility instead of facing it. But now, sitting across from the woman who had raised his child alone, he felt ashamed of the choices he'd made. "I'm sorry," David said sincerely, his voice trembling. "I can't change the past, but I want to make things right. For Marcus. For you." Evelyn studied him carefully, her expression unreadable. "Marcus doesn't know," she said after a long pause. "He thinks his father is gone. That's what I've always told him. You left before he was born, and you never came back." David flinched at her words. The thought of Marcus growing up believing his father didn't care about him was unbearable. "I need to tell him," David said firmly. "He deserves to know the truth." Evelyn shook her head, her eyes filling with tears. "It's not that simple, David. You can't just walk into his life and expect everything to be okay. He's been through so much already. What happens if you leave again? How will he handle that?" David understood her fears. They mirrored his own, but he couldn't let them stop him. "I'm not going anywhere," he promised. "Not this time. I'll prove it to both of you." Over the next few days, David began making amends. He started by helping Evelyn with her medical bills, paying off the debts that had piled up over the years. Then he offered to cover their rent and groceries, ensuring they wouldn't have to worry about money for a while. Evelyn was hesitant at first, reluctant to accept his help, but eventually she agreed, for Marcus's sake. Meanwhile, David worked on finding ways to reconnect with his son. He attended Marcus's school events, cheering loudly during basketball games and clapping enthusiastically at choir performances. At first, Marcus seemed confused by David's sudden presence in his life, but slowly he began to warm up to him. They bonded over music, sharing stories about their favorite songs and artists. David even taught Marcus a few tricks on the guitar, marveling at how naturally talented the boy was. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, David decided it was time to tell Marcus the truth. He glanced at Evelyn, who gave him a small nod of encouragement. Taking a deep breath, he turned to Marcus. "There's something I need to tell you," he began, his voice steady but gentle. "Something important." Marcus looked up, curiosity written all over his face. "What is it?" he asked. David hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "You know how I've been spending more time with you lately?" Marcus nodded. "Well, the reason for that is, I'm your father." For a moment, Marcus didn't react. He stared at David, his brow furrowed as if trying to process what he'd just heard. Then, slowly, realization dawned on his face. "Wait. You're my dad?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," David replied, his heart pounding. "I didn't know about you until recently. Your mom and we were young when it happened. I made some mistakes and I wasn't there for either of you. But I'm here now and I want to be a part of your life if you'll let me." Tears welled up in Marcus's eyes, and for a moment, David feared the worst. But then, Marcus threw, his arms around him, hugging him tightly. "I don't care about the past," Marcus said, his voice muffled against David's shoulder. "I'm just glad you're here now." David hugged him back, overwhelmed with emotion. He glanced at Evelyn, who smiled through her tears. In that moment, he realized that forgiveness wasn't something you earned. It was something you received because of love. With time, Marcus adjusted to having David in his life. At first, calling him Dad felt strange, especially since he'd grown up without one. But David proved himself worthy of the title. He showed up for every school play, helped Marcus with homework, and encouraged his musical aspirations. Together, they wrote original songs, blending Marcus's soulful voice with David's industry expertise. Evelyn, too, began to heal. With David's support, she focused on getting better, attending therapy sessions, and taking care of herself. For the first time in years, the family experienced stability and joy. One evening, as Marcus prepared for another performance, this time at a larger venue thanks to David's connections, he reflected on how far he'd come. From singing to save his mom to discovering his father, his journey was nothing short of miraculous. As he stepped onto the stage, he spotted both Evelyn and David in the audience, smiling proudly. In that moment, Marcus knew he wasn't alone anymore. He had a family that loved him, a dream within reach, and a story worth telling, a story of resilience, reunion, and redemption. And as the spotlight shone brightly on him, Marcus sang not just for himself, but for everyone who believed in second chances, proving that sometimes life's greatest surprises come when you least expect them. Weeks turned into months, and Marcus's life began to transform in ways he never imagined. With David now fully involved, their bond grew stronger each day. At first, it was awkward for Marcus to call him Dad. The word felt foreign on his tongue, like trying to fit a puzzle piece into the wrong spot. But as they spent more time together, the discomfort faded, replaced by a sense of belonging. For Marcus, having a father wasn't just about sharing blood. It was about feeling supported, understood, and loved. David made an effort to be present in every aspect of Marcus's life. He attended parent-teacher conferences, cheered loudly at basketball games, and even volunteered to chaperone school field trips. His presence didn't go unnoticed. Teachers and classmates alike remarked on how much happier Marcus seemed. Gone was the boy who used to sit quietly in class, keeping to himself. In his place stood someone brimming with confidence, eager to share his thoughts and dreams. But perhaps the most significant change happened through music. David introduced Marcus to new genres, teaching him techniques that elevated his singing and guitar playing. They spent countless evenings huddled over sheet music, brainstorming lyrics and fine-tuning melodies. Together, they wrote songs inspired by Marcus's experiences, songs about struggle, hope, and family. Each note carried a piece of their journey, a testament to how far they'd come. One afternoon, while practicing in the living room, David paused mid-strum and looked at Marcus thoughtfully. "You know," he said, setting the guitar aside, "you're incredibly talented. You could do big things with your voice." Marcus shrugged modestly, though he couldn't hide his excitement. "I just like singing," he replied. "It makes me feel free." David smiled warmly. "That's exactly why you should take it seriously. Music has the power to move people, to change lives. And I think you have what it takes to make a real impact." The idea of pursuing music professionally had always been a distant dream for Marcus. Growing up poor, he'd learned early on that dreams often stayed dreams because reality got in the way. But with David's encouragement, the possibility no longer felt out of reach. Maybe, just maybe, he could turn his passion into something more. David wasted no time putting plans into motion. Using his connections in the music industry, he arranged for Marcus to perform at larger venues, local festivals, charity events, and community gatherings. At first, Marcus was nervous about stepping onto bigger stages, but David reassured him. "Just sing like you always do," he advised. "Let your heart guide you, and the rest will follow." True to David's words, Marcus's performances captivated audiences wherever he went. People were drawn not only to his voice, but also to the authenticity behind his songs. Whether he sang about his mom's resilience or his own struggles, listeners connected deeply with his story. After one particularly moving performance, a woman approached Marcus, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "Your song gave me strength when I needed it most." Moments like these reinforced Marcus's belief that music wasn't just for him, it was for others too. It was a way to heal, to inspire, and to bring people together. And knowing that his dad believed in him made all the difference. While Marcus thrived creatively, Evelyn continued to recover physically and emotionally. With David taking care of financial burdens, she focused on rebuilding her health. She started attending physical therapy sessions twice a week and joined a support group for single mothers. Slowly but surely, the color returned to her cheeks and the sparkle reappeared in her eyes. Seeing Evelyn regain her strength filled David with a mix of pride and guilt. Pride because he was finally doing right by her, and guilt because he knew he should have been there all along. He often found himself apologizing not just with words but with actions. On weekends, he cooked elaborate meals, filling the apartment with the aroma of roasted chicken and fresh vegetables. He helped Evelyn clean and organize, turning their small space into a cozy home. Little by little, they rebuilt trust, laying the foundation for a future none of them had dared to imagine before. Despite their progress, challenges remained. Evelyn still struggled with moments of doubt, wondering if David's return was permanent or just another fleeting chapter in their lives. "What happens if you leave again?" she asked one evening, her voice trembling. "Marcus needs stability. He can't handle losing you a second time." David reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "I'm not going anywhere," he promised, his tone unwavering. "Not this time. I've made mistakes, Evelyn, but I'm here to stay for both of you." Though she wanted to believe him, Evelyn couldn't shake the fear entirely. Years of hardship had taught her to guard her heart against disappointment. Still, she allowed herself to hope, clinging to the promise of a brighter tomorrow. As winter approached, David decided it was time to introduce Marcus to the world beyond their small town. He arranged for them to visit New York City during the holiday season, promising Marcus an unforgettable experience. "We'll see Broadway shows, eat amazing food, and explore everything the city has to offer," David explained excitedly. "And maybe we'll even meet some people who can help take your music career to the next level." Marcus's eyes widened with wonder. He'd never been outside their state, let alone to a bustling metropolis like New York. The thought of performing on such a grand stage thrilled him, but it also terrified him. What if he wasn't good enough? What if people laughed instead of clapping? Sensing his son's apprehension, David placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Remember, Marcus, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be yourself. That's what makes you special." When they arrived in New York, the city dazzled them with its lights, sounds, and energy. They wandered through Times Square, marveled at the towering skyscrapers, and enjoyed hot chocolate from street vendors. One evening, they attended a sold-out concert featuring some of the biggest names in the music industry. As Marcus watched the performers light up the stage, he realized how vast and exciting the world of music truly was. After the show, David introduced Marcus to a few industry professionals he knew. Though initially shy, Marcus quickly warmed up, sharing stories about his journey and performing snippets of his original songs. To his amazement, the response was overwhelmingly positive. "Keep doing what you're doing," one producer told him. "The world needs voices like yours." By the end of the trip, Marcus felt invigorated, his dreams bigger than ever. He returned home determined to work harder, to push past his fears and embrace the opportunities ahead. Back in their hometown, life settled into a rhythm of growth and gratitude. Marcus practiced tirelessly, honing his craft under David's guidance. Evelyn continued to heal, finding joy in simple pleasures like baking cookies or reading novels by the window. And David, once haunted by regret, discovered a newfound purpose in being the father and partner he should have been all along. Together, they formed a team, a family united by love, forgiveness, and shared ambition. Every obstacle they faced became a stepping stone, every triumph a reminder of how far they'd come. For Marcus, singing was no longer just about saving his mom or impressing judges. It was about telling their story, a story of resilience, redemption, and the unbreakable bonds of family. And as the seasons changed, bringing new challenges and opportunities, Marcus knew one thing for certain. No matter what the future held, he wouldn't face it alone. Months passed, and Marcus's life continued to evolve in ways he could never have imagined. With David by his side, his confidence soared, and his dreams grew bigger with each passing day. The small town that had once felt suffocating now seemed full of opportunity, thanks to the support system he'd gained. Evelyn, too, was thriving. Her health improved significantly, and she began volunteering at a local community center, helping other struggling families navigate their hardships. The three of them were finally building the life they deserved, one filled with love, purpose, and hope. David worked tirelessly to nurture Marcus's talent, knowing it wasn't just about music but also about giving his son the tools to succeed in life. He arranged for Marcus to record some of his original songs at a professional studio in the nearest city, a 2-hour drive from their home. On the day of the recording session, Marcus woke up early, buzzing with excitement. He couldn't believe this was happening, his voice captured forever on tape, ready to be shared with the world. The studio was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen before. Microphones hung from the ceiling, soundboards glowed with colorful buttons, and plush headphones rested on stands like treasures waiting to be claimed. David introduced him to the sound engineer, a kind man named Greg who promised to make Marcus feel comfortable. "Just sing like you're performing for your mom," Greg said with a grin. "That's all it takes." As Marcus stepped into the booth, his nerves returned. What if he messed up? What if his voice didn't sound as good on the recording as it did live? But then he closed his eyes and thought of Evelyn, lying in bed during her sickest days, humming lullabies to help him sleep. He thought of David, sitting beside him late at night, teaching him chords on the guitar. And he thought of himself, the boy who sang not just for survival, but for connection. Taking a deep breath, Marcus began to sing. His voice soared through the speakers, raw and powerful, filling the room with emotion. Greg nodded approvingly, adjusting levels on the soundboard. Outside the booth, David stood quietly, tears streaming down his face. He had heard Marcus sing countless times before, but this was different. This wasn't just a performance, it was proof of how far they had come together as a family. When the session ended, Marcus emerged from the booth beaming. "How did I do?" he asked eagerly. David pulled him into a tight hug. "You were perfect," he whispered. "Absolutely perfect." The recordings turned out better than anyone expected. David uploaded the tracks to online platforms, sharing them with friends, family, and industry contacts. Within weeks, Marcus's songs started gaining traction. People left heartfelt comments praising his lyrics and vocals, saying his music inspired them to keep going despite their own struggles. Local radio stations even began playing his songs, introducing his voice to an even wider audience. One evening, as Marcus scrolled through social media, he noticed something incredible. His song, "Stand By Me," had been shared thousands of times, accompanied by messages of gratitude from listeners around the world. One comment stood out. Your voice reminds me of my own dad. He used to sing this to me when I was little. It brought back so many memories, thank you. Reading those words, Marcus felt a surge of pride. His music wasn't just touching lives, it was healing hearts. Encouraged by the response, David decided it was time to take things further. He reached out to a friend in Los Angeles, a well-known talent manager named Lisa Carter. No relation. After listening to Marcus's recordings, Lisa agreed to meet with them during her upcoming visit to the East Coast. The meeting took place in a cozy cafe, where Lisa listened intently as Marcus performed a few acoustic versions of his songs. When he finished, she smiled warmly. "You've got something special," she said. "Let's see where we can take this." With Lisa on board, opportunities began pouring in. She booked Marcus for interviews, performances, and collaborations with other young artists. At first, Marcus worried about balancing fame with schoolwork, but David assured him they would figure it out together. "Education is important," David told him, "but so is following your dreams. We'll make sure neither gets neglected." Evelyn watched proudly as her son navigated this new chapter of his life. Though she occasionally worried about the pressures of growing attention, she trusted David to guide Marcus wisely. More importantly, she saw how happy he was, how alive he felt every time he stepped onto a stage or wrote a new song. For Evelyn, that joy was worth everything. One of Marcus's biggest milestones came when Lisa secured him a spot at a national youth talent competition. Held in Chicago, the event drew contestants from across the country, all vying for a chance to win scholarships and mentorships. As the date approached, Marcus practiced relentlessly, determined to give his best performance. Yet, this wasn't just about winning. It was about showing the world what he was capable of. On the day of the competition, the auditorium buzzed with anticipation. Contestants rehearsed backstage, parents snapped photos, and judges scribbled notes. Marcus sat quietly in a corner, strumming his guitar and running through his set list. David knelt beside him, offering last-minute advice. "Remember why you're here," he said softly. "Sing for yourself, for your mom, for everyone who believes in you. That's all that matters." When Marcus's name was called, he walked onto the stage with steady steps, clutching his guitar tightly. The spotlight blinded him momentarily, but he focused on the microphone stand in front of him. Closing his eyes, he began to sing. His voice carried through the auditorium, rich and soulful, weaving a story of loss, love, and redemption. The audience listened in silence, their faces reflecting the emotions stirred by his words. By the time Marcus finished, the room erupted into applause. Judges wiped away tears and fellow contestants hugged him backstage, congratulating him on an unforgettable performance. Though the results wouldn't be announced until later that evening, Marcus knew he had already won, in his heart, in his journey, and in the bond he shared with his family. That night, as the winners were revealed, Marcus held his breath. Third place went to a violinist, second to a dancer. Then came the announcement for first prize. And the winner is Marcus Johnson. For a moment, Marcus froze. Was this real? Had he really done it? Then David nudged him gently, urging him forward. Stepping onto the stage, Marcus accepted the trophy, tears streaming down his face. He scanned the crowd, finding Evelyn and David seated near the front, clapping wildly. Their smiles said it all. They were proud of him, no matter what. In his acceptance speech, Marcus thanked everyone who had supported him along the way. "This isn't just my victory," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "It belongs to my mom, who taught me to never give up, and to my dad, who showed me it's never too late to start over. And most of all, it belongs to anyone who's ever felt like they didn't belong. Keep singing your truth, it will lead you home." Back in their hometown, life returned to normal. But it was a new kind of normal. Marcus continued writing music, performing whenever he could, while staying grounded in his roots. David remained his steadfast mentor, guiding him with wisdom, earned through years of experience. Evelyn, healthier and happier than ever, cheered them both on, grateful for the family they had become. Together they proved that sometimes life's greatest blessings come wrapped in unexpected packages. For Marcus, it had started with a simple act of courage, singing at a talent show to save his mom. But it had led him to discover so much more: his father, his passion, and the unshakable power of love. As Marcus stood on stage one final time, that year, bathed in golden light, he sang not just for himself but for everyone who believed in second chances. His voice echoed through the auditorium, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope can rise like a melody, carrying us toward brighter tomorrows.